Hey, I'm Jen Cui. I'm a certified life coach on a mission to guide women in doing the deep inner work necessary to liberate their true selves and create the incredible life they dream of living. This is the Fantastical Life Podcast. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Creating a Fantastical Life podcast. I'm your host, Jen Cui, and today I am here with Spyridon, aka Spiros,
Michalakis, yeah.
There we go. And he is a mathematical physicist at CalTech who thrived during the global pandemic, he says, in large part because of me, but
very true.
Is awesome in itself. He loves volleyball, anime, sushi, and a good wine and whiskey. He also has solved one of the only two solved open problems of mathematical physics during his PhD.
That was right after my PhD, my postdoc in Los Alamos International. Yeah.
And to lay people, what that means is basically he solved an impossible, unsolvable question in math for the application of physics, which, these questions being solved leads to significant understanding of our physical world, can lead to just a huge ripple effect of, up-leveling society and right. He was also the scientific consultant on Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and Avengers Endgame, as well as Bill and Ted, into the multiverse.
Bill and Ted Face the Music. Yeah, there's Doctor Strange into the multiverse of madness.
That one's coming up. I'm so excited. So basically, Spiro here is just has his hands in a bunch of different pots and is really awesome at what he does. Very genius level person in math and physics. So I'm really excited to have you on and start talking about just everything physics, everything life, and So I want to start off with just what are you currently working on to give people a little bit more context of what your life looks like?
That's that may take us the next week to get into that, if that's the easy question. What am I currently working on? So some of the things that are my priorities over this past couple of months have to do with quantum physics, most of the things I would say, and more broadly with educating the next generation when it comes to, quantum physics, but also STEM in general. Mm-hmm. I am the US representative for something known now as the World Quantum Day, which is April 14th. So tune in for that. Working with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the National Quantum Coordination Office. They always give them, names, which makes it very official. So I'm working with the good people over there, as well as with some of the bigger tech giants like, Google and AWS and Microsoft and IBM, to get the next generation kind of excited about quantum physics and to explain some of this stuff in a way that is both intriguing and also removes most of the math from any of this, because we have to do it at a level that is middle school and high school. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things. And in my personal research direction, I am trying to figure out how to, I guess the best way to put it is how to explain everything humanity knows this far at the deepest levels of physics, but in a way that my ancient Greek ancestors could understand without any of the intervening mathematics over the past 2,000 years.
Wow. Yes. Big tasks. And definitely will be tuning in for World Quantum Day. Now you're also working on a book. Excited for that.
That's part of that as well, trying to figure out, the book is motivating me to figure out everything that we already know, and plus, quantum gravity, aspects of quantum gravity, of how to marry the force of gravity with the other four forces, electromagnetism and strong and weak nuclear forces, in a single package. But I care about the mathematics because I'm a mathematical physicist, but I want to go beyond both physics and mathematics to answer the question of why, not the question of how and what the universe does to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in taking on all these endeavors, like it requires focus and attention and energy. And this is like your life's work. Like you've been doing this for decades. And you've been so involved in mathematics and have a love for it ever since you were a kid. So tell me more about what keeps you going here. Like has your purpose in working in math, like how has that evolved and what is kind of the future of all that?
Yeah, so for me, it started with a love for mathematical puzzles when I was a kid. And then I ended up taking part in what is known as the Math Olympiad when I was growing up in Greece. And that was, I guess, a culmination of how much I loved solving puzzles and difficult math problems, where difficult doesn't mean that you need to know a lot of math, like calculus or more advanced math. It was difficult because it doesn't matter who you are and how much math you know. It just takes some type of insight or ingenuity, as you would say, right, to figure out what to do next. And at some point, I honed these skills enough to also be good at advanced math, right? I have a PhD in mathematics, which means I had to go pretty deep to understand how all these mathematical structures are related to each other, all the different aspects of mathematics at some level, each of them, because there is so much math out there, and how they connect. And so more recently, ironically, because motivated by trying to understand how the universe works, I had to go very, very deeply into mathematics itself, like the very foundations of mathematics, to figure out what is going on at the foundations of physics itself. And when I went there, to answer your question, and also what motivates me now, I saw that the reason why we think mathematics and physics and science in general cannot answer the why of like life and the universe and all that stuff, right? So you may turn to spirituality or religion for something like that, or philosophy. The reason is because it's not, it may sound obvious to certain people, but from within science, you think that you can explain everything. The reason is because physics, in my opinion, was developed to try to answer the question of what did we just observe, okay? Then mathematics is used as a more general framework to answer the question of how, right? How does that work? How could this work, right? How could this be what we just observed? And there is something else that I think is a very important part of human knowledge itself, like what is known as theories of knowledge. Religion and spirituality and everything else is actually part of that. But it's a general framework called an epistemology, right? The Greek word for, the ways we know things, whether it is emotionally or through direct insight or divine inspiration, whatever it is, it's always like a downloading of some knowledge. And there is a way to actually formalize how that works as well, how a universe of questions and the relationship between them and the answers that we get from them, how this can actually exist. And when you go in there, then you realize that mathematics and physics are actually special universes that exist within this larger universe of all possible, like, epistemology of all possible ways of knowing things. So that's where you answer the why. So that's what I'm excited about, like with one foot like on physics, right? And another foot on mathematics, I'm trying to touch with my hands like that world of the why, guided by that.
Yeah. So are you saying that there is a mathematical way, or?
No, it's something that goes beyond mathematics, that tells mathematics also how to exist and why it exists. It's a place where math itself is not enough, right, to answer its own existence. And, to be more specific, you may remember, like in mathematics and in theorems, you may have to prove, or when things are defined, that they are defined a specific way, okay? We may intuitively, as humans, make the mistake in thinking that some things are just the way they are because there's no other way, right? That's how it should be. 1 + 1 = 2 and all that stuff. But then you realize that actually, as you go deeper, these are just definitions. Somebody made a choice, right? That's what a definition is. And definitions are very powerful because choices correspond to particular useful point of view we have and relationships with the things outside of us, right? The things that we want to know, whether they are part of the mathematical universe or part of the physical universe or part of the metaphysical universe, you always require a relationship, right, with that thing outside of you. And different relationships and different sets of questions you can ask, right, during that relationship allow you to see very different parts of the same thing, right? In one of its expressions, it looks like physical reality. In another one, it looks like a more general mathematical reality. And in an even more general way, like you can have a whole spiritual realm you can think of that then you're like, how do I, right? If spirituality was not connected with the physical realm via ourselves, it would be useless. You know, it could be just like wishful thinking.
Right.
So the question is, how do you bridge all these worlds?
Right. Yeah, I like how you say, everything has to be defined in order for us to have context to our life, right? Because we're all trying to just figure out how to live within the context of the world. In order to do that, we got to define. So I think one of the things you kind of alluded to there is like the idea of truth and like defining truth. And, to me, I actually was just having a conversation with Sam's dad about this, about facts versus truth, because he is an accountant, very into the math and statistics of things. To me, facts are just like that. They're like the indisputable kind of numbers based off of, I guess, the system of math, right? That is just objective. And then the truth is the subjective, meaning that we want to give those facts, like the way that we want to use them, right? Is the perspective. So what's your take on it? Like, how do you define truth?
That's a great question. The way I define truth is by saying there is no such thing. And I will go further than even what you said, right? And again, remember, I'm a mathematical physicist. I'm the most hardcore accountant in the universe.
Quantum physics.
Exactly. And so the question becomes like, what is truth if it does not exist? How is the illusion of truth, right? And patterns and the laws of physics and even of mathematical truth, like 1 + 1 = 2, how can it be such a powerful, such a potent illusion? And I will go back to what I said earlier, that there is no such thing as facts. I know it's very strange to hear it from somebody like me, and I definitely want the world to know that there is such thing as facts that can be useful, okay? But fundamentally, there isn't any such thing. Everyone has their own truth for a reason. It may or may not be useful in relationship to others, okay? So what I mean by that is that if you say...
That's Cornelius crying.
Right. It's like, what?
Hi, buddy.
That is...
Continue.
They're living their truth.
Yeah.
So even when you said that there is such a thing as like just some numbers, right? That everyone can agree, objective reality, right? Objective truth versus subjective one. What I'm trying to say is that there is an illusion that there is a difference between objective and subjective. Everything is subjective. The difference is to what extent, okay? If you have 1 million people out of 1,000,001 in the world agreeing with you on a subjective truth, it basically becomes objective truth, right? And you consider this last person as being a little crazy, and that they're looking at the same thing as you, and they're seeing, instead of a 3, they're seeing a 5, right?
Or like the earth is flat.
Yes, exactly, right? Where there's a lot of people that I know also that think still that the earth is flat. And the reason is actually one of faith at that point, if we're being honest, because no human has directly ever observed the earth being a globe, right? Outside of the astronauts, who have seen it with their own eyes because they're up there and they're like, well, okay, wow, it looks like a beautiful sphere. That's really awesome. But for the rest of us, we can deduce it through a series of trust thought experiments, okay? NASA, if you trust NASA and JPL, right, then if they take a picture or their astronauts do that and it looks like a duck, then it is a duck, right? Versus they took the flat earth and then they, for some reason, they're trying to manipulate everyone's perception of it. And so the question then becomes, at which point, forget even about just the earth being flat or round, at which point do you take what other people tell you for granted instead of just being a doubting Thomas all your life and saying, hey, I don't care unless I see it with my own eyes and also can interpret it in my own way, whatever I'm even looking at, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the irony with some of these things is that, you know, you may have the rest of the world saying like, okay, you know, it's dumb to think that the earth is flat, right? Mm-hmm. But you may be and say, no, I'm going to go against that, right? Mm-hmm. You're dumb, right? I know the truth. You don't understand it. You've all drunk the Kool-Aid. But in the same breath, right? To say like, but, you know, I definitely believe this other thing. And this is happening, especially like the past 4 or 5 years in politics. If I really do believe this other thing that is insane, like, you know, much more crazy, and I've never, you know, observed it myself, but I totally buy into that because the person who is telling me that is somebody I trust, right? So it is selective trust. And by the way, we all do that. We all do that, right? We all have selective trust. It just depends on like how thoughtful we are, I think, as we choose the meta level like mechanism that allows us to know things, right? Again, the theory of knowledge is not always direct. You don't always know things directly, right? Sometimes you know them via hearsay, or somebody else did something, or they wrote a book, and because all these people trusted this person, okay, or the people who did that, then you're like, okay, I trust the ones who trusted the person who then trusted the process. There's many degrees of separation, and often mistakes happen in between. But the one final arbiter of what is true is what is useful. And if somebody says like me, and I'm going to be right, that gravity is also an illusion, okay, and we've known this for about 100 years now, you shouldn't just take this to mean like you can just fly or jump out the window and you're going to be okay. I could just
float at any point in time now. Yeah.
Exactly. What it means, what I'm trying to say again, is that there is no such thing as fundamentally objective truth, as in everyone, right? And not, I don't mean by everyone, just human beings. I mean, every possible observer and way to observe the same thing as human beings can will give the same answer, right? So that's what it comes down to, that there is ways to break even gravity itself, but that requires occupying a new perspective that may be nearly too alien for a human being, right?
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like you can only have the belief that something is true within the operation of like a specific paradigm, right? And like it's the definition thing, right? You have to define your terms and then you can agree like this is the answer or this is the truth. But you're saying there's so many different paradigms you can operate in that there is no such thing as like one truth. And so it's interesting because I kind of go to in coaching, I'll almost come back to like it's a thought, right? Like the way like you think you have to do something, or you know, this is just how things work. Those are all just thoughts, right? Rules, people like to say rules are meant to be broken. In some ways, I think it's like, who cares if they were meant to be broken? Who cares if rules were meant to keep us like safe or to oppress people or whatever? At the end of the day, all rules were just made up, right?
Correct.
So
absolutely. And that's where I was, so if I may, that's what I was getting at, that you're right. All rules are made up. Some people may say like, okay, Jen, like, I mean, all human rules are made up, right? Not the rules of physics, right? You know, or of mathematics. And what I'm saying clearly to everyone who is listening is all rules are made up. All of them. I really do mean all of them, including, and I'm going to go there, right? Like, again, the very rules of mathematics, like 1 + 1 = 2, is made up. It's actually rarely true that 1 + 1 = 2. I'm not going to, I mean, maybe we can go into that later because it's going to break people's minds, right? That's the one thing, as a conservative human being, usually you're like, no. You can tell me everything else is relative to the observer, right? Gender, this, that, but at least you know that 1 + 1 = 2, or that there is a space and time. Nope. You know, even that stuff. And so what breaks our mind is not trying to accept the truth, right? That 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, it takes some time even for that as you're a kid to learn how to build mathematics on top of that. But what breaks our mind really, when you really go deep as a thinker, is to imagine a world that makes sense where 1 + 1 is not equal to 2. What the hell does it mean? Like, what basic fundamental assumption do we have to break within mathematics and even the way of knowing things for this to not be true, but still that world to become kind of intuitive once you start inhabiting it? And the only simple example I'll give is that when you have like two people that come together, they have sex, and then all of a sudden 1 + 1 is equal to 3 or 4. Okay,
Right.
how? You have one human being, you have another human being, you add them together. If you just look at them before they do anything, they're just two, right? Just two human beings. At all times, 1 + 1 is equal to 2. It doesn't say like 1 + 1 is equal to 2 until it is 3 or 4, right? You keep taking snapshots of these people, they have some sex in between, and all of a sudden there's like 9 months later, 3 or 4, whatever. In fact, all of humanity exists because of some of, so, you know, the 1 + 1 becoming like 9 billion. And the question is, it starts to give you pause, and you're like, wait, but how are you messing with me now? Like, what am I missing here, right? What we're missing is that the very concept of one, depending on how you look at it, right, can be more than one, has the potential to combine with something else to create, to be more than just the sum of its parts. Our DNA, right, our organs, all that stuff that allow us from two to create more. And this is the case with many other things like in the universe as well. So it's a matter of definition. And then somebody says, no, but what I meant is the thing you write down on a piece of paper, or an orange and another orange. Like, you could do probably the same thing, you know, smash 2 oranges together, 1 + 1 becomes 1, just larger. You know,
Yeah.
so
I think it's interesting to think about that because it touches on a problem, not, I guess, a challenge that I think a lot of humans are plagued with, which is just this need, this like craving, this desire for certainty and for control, and to like operate within a specific set of rules that they like create all this resistance towards any information outside of that, right? Like, because what you're saying, it takes the ability to open your perspective and just be curious and invite in like the unknown and the ununderstood, and that there is such a thing as multiple truths.
yeah,
I guess like multiple
I've thought about that a bunch lately, and because of, it's not because of religion, because religion didn't exist, right, you know, up until much more recently in human history. And it's in some ways like religion was created to try to satisfy our need to know, right, and to have that control, as you said, whether it was like lightning or tornadoes or earthquakes or any of these things. In some ways, like the mythologies around it are very scientific in the sense that they're trying to really help humanity, to really make a difference, right? Otherwise, humans don't do things that are unnecessary. We may realize later on, 1,000 years later, they may not be as necessary, but we should not forget to pay tribute to the necessity of it at the time, right, that it was discovered and created, right, for whatever its purpose was. So I think it's very important that people, you know, try to maintain a sense of control over their surroundings, over themselves, a sense of ideals and truths. This is very important. I mean, I think we both agree on this one, right? Otherwise, you're just flip-flopping every other day, and you don't even know how to count on your own self, okay? But the universe itself, at its fundamental level, has to be exactly that, the biggest flip-flopper in the multiverse. Why? Because flip-flopping means that you can occupy all possible different states, you can hold both positions of a difficult issue at the same time, right? And the reason why the universe itself fundamentally has to be like that is because there are no rules down there. We create the choices of how much of this pluripotent state, this chaotic state of the universe, to manifest for our lives. Okay, and I don't mean manifest in the way you may be thinking, like, even though I do, like there are ways in which our perceptual systems, like the rods and cones, the back of our eye and the retina side, get to filter for us before we even realize this, most of the electromagnetic spectrum away. Most of light, which is how we connect and know most other things, outside of sounds, right, and smells, is filtered out. So we only get to see a tiny amount, right? Right now, I am connected to you via Wi-Fi signals, at least on my end. I don't know if you're like Ethernet or something like that, okay? That's pretty amazing if you think about it. If we could see at that part of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? I think it's 2.4 gigahertz or like 5 gigahertz, depending on, you know, what protocol you're using. If you could see at such high frequency and we cannot, then it'd be a very strange world around you. You could see all these bouncing like Wi-Fi signals between houses, all this stuff, which are there. We know it's there because if they're not there, then how the heck are we talking to each other? How are they being transduced into electromagnetic pulses that then change, right? What we see on our screen and here right now. And that's amazing. I mean, again, we know from animals that they can see different parts of the spectrum, that cats have like different abilities, that dogs have, you know, and animals in general also have different ways of interacting with exactly the same world. That's what I'm trying to say. We live in exactly the same universe, okay, as them, and then they get to perceive it in different ways. Because olfactory, like the chemical reactions that they have access to from what is already there, may not interact with us, we're not even aware of it, but they can pick up that smell or that sound, right, at the higher frequency and all that stuff.
Right. I mean, I think right, the idea of life is just a set of perspectives, right? Your life is just your perspective. It's like a show, right? It's your thoughts, your feelings, what you can have the ability to see, to do. And I want to touch upon, go back to like what you're saying about manifestation, because I was actually going to ask you about that. Like, what does quantum physics say about this like law of attraction? Is it, because I think on one end of the spectrum, right, people, it's either like purely a mindset, because I'm spiritual in like believing that you can create your reality, right? There's nothing stopping you from creating what you want in the future other than you. And so part of manifestation is having the mindset piece to open yourself up to knowing what you want, to have that perspective that is available to you so that you can take action in getting what you want. So on one end of the spectrum, there's a purely mindset piece of when you align your actions to get what you want, your belief system to get what you want, obviously it will drop in, right? But then there's also the surrendering piece to like trusting the unknown, the randomness of the universe, right, in order to receive that.
So here's how I would answer this. Jen, do you believe that you can now teleport yourself on Venus and then survive for the next 2 weeks?
Definitely not.
Okay. So how come you just said like you can accomplish anything you want and you can manifest anything you want if you create the right mental space. So that's not the case, right? So what aspects of the mind do you think, and the mind is no different than anything else, right? The same thing with your hand. You know, I have to pick this up with my left hand. I just literally have to do this. I can't just I want it to manifest in my left hand, right? So there needs to be always a connection, an intermediary, like a messenger, a relationship. The universe is a set of relationships, even at the most fundamental level. And it's about which relationships and how do you get to activate them, right? Now, the mind itself is a set of relationships, a set of emergent relationships that create thoughts from neural activity and all these things. And we are so used to thinking like, well, okay, the same mind, I can tell my hand what to do right now. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? Why can't I just telepathically or telekinetically or entangle, you know, the same way that my mind does is with my hands? Everything okay on that side?
Yeah, it's just like cats. They're getting stir crazy. I don't know what. Okay. But sorry, continue.
So I can hopefully try to manifest some calm on the cat side. The same mind that does that, right, has the ability to, through thoughts, vocalize them and change somebody's life simply by just saying the right thing at the right time. Again, this is just electromagnetic, like, you know, pulses up here and chemical reactions transduced via phonons, right? You know, perturbations in the air molecules, just these kind of vibrations that then go into somebody else's ear, again, electromagnetically, like being transduced into pulses like up in the brain, that they create the illusion of this thought that then changes someone almost physical, like they go from crying or wanting to like not eating anymore and all that stuff to just the difference between getting like a call from somebody you really care about from the hospital and say the operation went well versus we did the best we could, I am sorry. This the words are just so, you could even say with a yes or no, a 0 or a 1, and this alone is enough through, you know, again, electromagnetic waves or pulses or whatever, however it is being transmitted far away from where it happened, to change your life, the path of your life, or how you, right, you move forward. And so for me, the way I think of manifestation is one of the most honest things about science is that it gets shit done, like nobody's business, like nobody else's business, right? Very few others have that kind of success record. Because others may say like, no, you have to think this way and you have to do this way. And then out of a million like cases where people applied that, how many of them succeeded? If it is only like 50-50 or less even than 50, or just kind of random, then you're like, all right, I mean, might as well, I could have said the other thing, the opposite, right? And they may have probably gotten the same effect. With science, the thing that is annoyingly like good at is that once it gets something right, it gets something right because it just figured something out, right? That is like, if it is good enough, it can explain why it works. Once it goes there, when you go deep enough, it can tell you like why we expect it to work every time versus a sense, just a feeling that like, I think this will work, right? I hope, or I've tested it myself a couple of times, right? And it seems to work. And when it comes to manifesting something that is in your mind to something external, science does that all the time, right? That's the whole point. It may not be direct, but first some engineer, some mathematician originally had the idea of like, what if we could do computation and abstract it instead of having a freaking abacus or with little beans and stuff, right? What would that look like? And then he went one step further and said like, okay, in general, what do you need to put together? What kind of materials could be proxies for like the zeros and ones or the left and right of an abacus and all that stuff? And over time, which is a blink of an eye over the history of the universe, we have the ability to telepathically communicate with each other across vast distances right now. We're not sitting next to each other, right? We're sitting very far apart from each other, but I think you would agree with me, for thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands of years, humans wanted to manifest the ability to communicate with somebody very far away, and none of them was able to do it, right? Just basically, and now it's on demand. As I was saying before, we're just like Zoom call, like that. To understand the way to connect our wish, right, a very human thing, to something that can manifest in the physical world in the span of a day, span of a year, span of, we're trying to build quantum computers right now. We really all want it really, really badly to be true yesterday, okay? But the fun part is that the universe doesn't give a shit. It's like, you have not earned it. And what we think of as earned it is like our feelings. How badly do I really want it, right? And there is something in Greek mythology that is very powerful that says, Sin Athena ke Hirakini, like the goddess Athena was supposed to be the goddess of wisdom, okay, very powerful. And there were people who kept praying to the goddess, okay? Even like thousands of years ago, this is from thousands of years ago, this saying, kept praying and saying like, but how come I'm not getting what I want? I'm so devout, like I sacrifice things to your altar, right? Athena, that's in the Acropolis, by the way, in Greece. And at some point, the goddess came like down, and said, hey, keep praying, right? I'm listening, but move your ass, like do something, don't just, pray and expect me to do all this stuff. Like, how are you, if you really care about this, how are you going to manifest it?
Right. I think we're actually more aligned than maybe you think in terms of manifestation, because what I was saying is like, right, it's a mindset that leads you to take aligned action.
Yeah.
Even with like, okay, if I wanted to transport to Venus and survive for a couple of days, part of it, my thought was like, well, okay, kids are like very imaginative, right? And this goes into defining context.
Yes.
I could create, like, get backdrops of Venus and put on a spacesuit and be like, yes, and pretend, right?
Yeah.
And this is really funny because in, people attracting things, it's like, if you're not very specific about what you want, you might get something that like seems like it, but like isn't exactly it.
Yeah.
This is a separate thing. But the point is, right, you have the mentality of exactly what you want to create. And by believing that that is possible, by believing that is truth, by like being able to be in that space, you're able to create it. You're able to take the action needed for it. When I just hosted a workshop yesterday for spring equinox, right? Helping people like go through the transition.
Yeah.
And a manifestation, I have this exercise of a T-chart of what you can do, right? And what you will do, what's within your control, and then what's everything outside of your control that you want the universe to do. And when you actually look at what you want to create, because most people are not over here like trying to use manifestation to teleport or to be a sovereign queen of Jupiter. Like, it's all within the context, like the context of goal setting, goal hitting, right? Having the physical reality that's within the context of our realm of what's possible in their life, whether it's more money, whether it's a partner, whether it is, a specific body or whatever. Right. And when you operate within that, there is things that are all within your control. There's a lot more than most people think. And then the things that you want the universe to do. Right. And the things that the universe can do, for example, is dropping in people who, like, if you start a conversation with, end up being very vulnerable. Right. Or these people who, hey, that looks like the person that I was trying to attract, or they have a specific vibe about them. Or, oh, wow, wait, I was just thinking about wanting to go to an event to meet more people. And here's this hiking event group page, like an ad that just showed up, right? And those serendipities of the universe that seem quote unquote random, right? Yeah. I think that.
Okay, may I, as the quantum physicist, I will tell you this. For every universe in which the manifestation worked, there is another one where it didn't. So what I'm trying to say, is that I do mean when, there's a reason why I started with the pluripotency of the universe, which is very powerful, right? It is almost insane to even believe that. But the upside of this, or the downside of this, is that you're because you're talking about entangling yourself, right, with the subset of universes, or from the multiverse, in which that person was dropped next to you, or the hiking thing appeared on your thing and all that stuff. And what I'm telling you is that for every single one of them, even though you're exactly the same, and you wanted to manifest, you made the same thing, you wanted the same thing, there's another set of universes in which it did not happen. So it's not just one choice and what happens. What I will say, though, why I do believe that manifestation, part of the process of manifestation, is so important, is because if you did not wish this, then in the half of the universe in which it was given to you, you would not have cared about it, and you have missed the opportunity to grab onto it and then use that as the next stepping stone for your life. And so you can say, well, what about the other half of the universes, right? What happens to these unlucky bastards, versions of myself that wanted the right stuff, it didn't work? It's perfectly fine, because we're talking about the frame rate in which these choices happen, right? In which the splits, you get to redraw, all right, every trillionth of a nanosecond. You get to ask again, like, but I still want it, all right? And some things are so unlikely to happen that the more you want it, the more it literally means, like, then you become a scientist or a doctor that says, like, oh, I want to save my mom's life. She has cancer. If I can't save her life, then at some point, at least I will know enough to save somebody else's life. Some things you need to, like, guide your own manifestation to how much you really want this to be true, right? And then every time the opportunity comes, you keep throwing away the half of the universes where you're not interested, because you keep, like, manipulating how you're going through it.
Right. Yeah, I think the thing about manifestation or law of attraction, because I'm not like super well versed in it, honestly. I just can use like the concept of it and the kind of like just personal context from my life with it to kind of see how this is integrated with all the thought work, right? All the practicality aspects of like what we can see, what we can think. But then you see the results of it being like you're always attracting in something. Like, I'm curious what your thoughts about this, right? Is that you're always attracting, there's something always happening, things are always coming through your life. And I think in your case of saying about these different timelines and all these multiverses, like where they might want the same thing but not get it, or maybe they don't even have the same like desires, right? And these things are still happening, but they're not grabbing onto it because there's not even within their thought realm, right? A lot of the people that I work with are very like conscious of what they don't want, not what they want, right? Like, I don't want to be depressed. Like, that's their goal. It's like, I just like don't want to be depressed. But to me, the way that I kind of explain, and I want your perspective about this, is like your focus is like on what you don't want, but all the universe kind of hears is what you're saying, right? Depressed. Like, that's the only like context that your brain is thinking in. You're not thinking about what you do want and how to create that. You're thinking about what you don't want and how to not do those things.
I think both of them are very important, to know what you want and to also know what you don't want. But I think what you're getting at is also equally important, that if your wish and if what you're trying to manifest for your life is one that is passive, then that ironically is what I was saying, that's probably not going to be useful. Because if you're just hoping for something external to you without your own action to make it happen, you have 50-50 chance that it could be possible that you win the lottery or some amazing person shows up while you're still like feeling kind of hopeless, and then changes all that for you. Like, oh wow, I didn't want it, and it happened, right? Imagine the strength, the power of like saying, no, what I want, right, is to be happy. How? Why? What do I do? And that's where someone like you is so powerful, that comes in and be like, realigns and says, okay, the positive action, the things you can do. And the amazing thing then is that at the end of the journey, they realized that what made them happy was the journey itself, was their own actions, right? It wasn't the finding that person and all the stuff. I have many famous friends, okay? I could be like, oh my God, what if I could be with just this one person? You know, what if they like me back or something like that, right? They have money, they have fame, all that stuff. As you know, with Casey, I'm perfectly happy and in love, okay? Because I found the person that was for me. That was the one that I, you know, from mistakes and what I didn't want in my life or what I thought I wanted and all that stuff, all of a sudden you find you're like, oh, versus what everyone else may think, like the answer to the question of like, what is the most amazing person I could be with, right? That's not, I mean, it's a set of relationships versus a one-off thing that says, and we know that too, right? And you know this, obviously, with some as well. You may feel like you're soulmates within like, you know, a few days of knowing each other, but it's not always like bright and wonderful. I felt the same way with Casey when I first met her playing volleyball, right? Even though she probably didn't reciprocate right away, but it is every day basically choosing. I think they say that, right? Choosing each other.
Yes.
You know, just making that choice. That's what I meant before. You have a choice to go either way. The universe too, in fact, right? That's the beauty of it. It allows you full freedom. And so how do you choose? How do you even know how to choose? Because your mind itself is also split into many minds. You know, so how do you even know that you're going to be in the universe where it even made the conscious choice to do this thing? Because as I said, there's another one where it didn't. And so meaning and feelings do not exist at any fundamental level. They only exist at a zoomed out level of human experience, right? Our atoms and neurons don't have any feelings, but they're the things that are necessary for us to even be human, right? All these things, our relationships with each other, all these things are artificial like everything else. They only matter from our perspective. which is the only thing that really matters, right? But in order for this perspective to be enriched, to become interesting, you need to connect with things outside of you, things, people, experiences, right? Traveling, whatever it is, right? Traveling physically, mentally, reading good books, this kind of thing, where you get to see the world from orthogonal points of view and be like, oh, right? Because that one mind starts becoming 3 minds, 20 minds, 1,000 minds, right? And all of a sudden you start seeing the world from almost like a bunch of satellites looking at the Earth, triangulating and seeing all of it instead of just a small patch and a small mountain range.
Can you expand on that idea of feelings and emotions that you were just talking about?
Yeah, so that's, do you believe that rocks have feelings?
No, because my thing was always that the thing that intacts our humanity, things that makes us human, is emotion.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree with that, because I imagine a lot of other animals also have emotions and rich emotional world, as you probably know. I think what makes us human is our ability to simulate universes on demand that do not exist. In other words, imagination that allows us to have almost a universal ability to, again, imagine or simulate things that we've never had physical input from our senses, and hence our mind never created these, dream-like states, right? But, how do you even manifest something? What is the first step? You have to visualize what you want to be true. That's not something a lot of things can do in the universe, okay? That's a meta level skill. To be able to do something like, unlike a machine like we have now, where you just feed it an input and then just has an output. And we are the same way, but we can simulate fake inputs, is what I'm trying to say. We can simulate as if I had seen this thing, I had experienced that, I had this life, and what would I do next if all these counterfactuals, as we call them, things that are not true, what if they were true? Right? The what if is a very powerful ability. Please, yes. Making sure like your home isn't on fire at the end of this.
They're very acting out. Okay.
They have their own emotional, world.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer to your question is yes, it is one of the defining features of living organisms, right? But again, we also get to be, ironically, the ones to define a lot of these things. So we often think we're the only ones that have them, because we try to define them so specifically to make humanity look awesome, right? Maybe trees also have emotions and all that stuff, because when you understand what emotions really are, they're chemical reactions that then have some emergent properties. But they could say, well, trees through the root system have a lot of chemical reactions that maybe decide some of the part of the forest dies to help the other part and all stuff. And then from our point of view, like, this is amazing. Look at them, right?
Yeah.
They're really like working together, having a society.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we talk about something like going back to, I guess, law of attraction, how emotions kind of go into this, and what you were saying about being really happy with Casey, right? And it's like, what about these other people? But it's like, you found this person for you, right? And those being kind of emotionally driven in a way, right? This is like, you feel, yeah. The thing with manifestation that I talk about is this detachment from the actual thing, because it's never about just like the actual object. And I guess I'm just talking more so on not the high level of all physics, but on this level of the reason why anybody wants, like why people want things, is because of a way they think they will feel when they get that, in a way of they think they get to think about themselves, a self-concept they get to achieve, or whatever about themselves or the world or other people. And that is kind of the driving force of being able to quote unquote manifest something, is when you tap into the real reason of why you want something, and you let that being your guiding principle, not the what, not the amount of money, not the specific thing, right? Because it's more powerful than that. It's like the intentionality that goes behind the scenes that fuels all of that, guarantees that you're going to be able to step into that way of being, step into that self-concept, and just become that person of you. And it's not about the thing anymore.
I think that's pretty powerful. I think that's a good first step.
Mm.
What I tell people, because often I get asked, like, as somebody who really understands quantum physics pretty deeply, the foundation of like reality itself, right? Can we manifest things? How do we manifest things? Can we have like spiritual shields around us for things that we don't
collapsing
want?
timelines,
Yeah. Can we get
timelines.
to exactly choose all these things? To me, the most honest thing I can say about this is that it is more about the journey. It's not even when you say like, okay, why do you want this? You're still like hoping, if you have even a good answer to why, right? Because I can help this and all that. The very best thing this can do for you is clarify the steps you may want to take. And there may be many different branches that get you towards that honest answer to why do you want it. And in fact, the most important reason why you should go through the why exercise, right? Why do you really like want this? Not relative to somebody else's expectation, but you, right? Why do you want this? Is because you're going to be the one who will have to keep making the choice to go down that path towards that singular goal. Because just like there is this one goal, there is also the other goal, and an infinite number of other goals you could have chosen. And many of them do not even share the initial steps. You have to have a phase transition between like, well, if I want to achieve this, then I have to really go this way. If I have to achieve this other thing, then I cannot even make up my mind halfway through. I really have to start something different now. Yeah. So that's why it's so important, right? That you ask them why. Don't do it for somebody else, because there exist precursors, right, in the step towards your success that you regret, which is exactly what happens with human beings. If you go down the wrong path for the wrong reasons, that's the issue. But what I say, at least, and like how you helped me also during the pandemic, was something I was beyond even that. It was just shut up and do it. Okay. Like, why should you exercise, Spiro, right? Why should you eat better? Why is like, shut up and do it, and you'll understand by doing it. Why? Because the thing that we require often as human beings to even know how to begin to address the why question, like, why do I want to be rich? Why do I want to look good? Like all that stuff. Again, it does not exist within a universe that is out of context. If you had already been working out all your life or eating healthy and all that stuff, right, then you may not even need to answer the question of why do you do that? I just do it. It makes me feel good. I am already like, I'm happy I had a bit choice to not do it, but I want to continue doing it. Okay. But if you haven't done any of these things, then you only have, the best you can do is look at other magazines or look at like other people or listen to your parents, like telling you why you should do it, but that's not yours.
Yes, I love that. And I do think like clarity comes from action. Like this is what gets people stuck so much, is this overwhelm of like, I don't know. And like, it's not really, you don't know, it's just, there's so many paths, kind of, right? Like there's so many ways and you never know how until you get there. So you just got to like, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And sometimes you just gotta, like, it's not about white knuckling through it and like forcing anything to happen for the result. It's about just going through the process and just going.
I agree. And coaches like you, your special gift, if I may, is that, you help people have clarity with what type of actions they can take, small steps, which is, as you said, not white knuckling it, because sometimes you have the Russian coaching approach. I think it's pretty bad right now, right? Which is like, just shut up and do it, right? Suffer through it or whatever. And I grew up with that also in Greece, more the boot camp military approach, just don't even. But there are ways, I believe, from my own life and from what I've learned from you as well, to get to the same answer and the same, journey in many ways without the unnecessary suffering. To unlock powers that you already have within you slowly and in interesting ways. And yes, uncomfortable every now and then, You have to move around, right? To break the ice around things so you can be more flexible, where you can start falling in love with like your new powers. And so you don't, white knuckling means you just haven't figured out a way to make it your own.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes. Gonna make that into a quote and cite you on it.
Good,
I
good.
love that.
I have a lot of other talking points here, like in my little.
Well, I guess like kind of adjacent, I guess, to this idea of finding something that's your own. One thing that we worked on together before was setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And your core value is also empathy.
Yeah.
That's your big thing. And I think a lot of people sometimes will see those two and see like that they conflict in some way. Like, how can you really care about somebody if you set boundaries, right? If you say no and all these things. So can you tell me a little bit about your take on boundaries and empathy?
Yeah, I mean, again, you said it, right? It seems superficially, at least, that setting boundaries while at the same time, claiming that empathy is the most important thing in the world, right? Then the highest form of intelligence, like I actually believe, it's almost contradictory, right? Because when you set a boundary, it feels like you are literally, you put a shield, a electromagnetic shield around you to not let communications come in or go out, right? With respect to certain, you're trying to filter things out. It's the same thing when people say, like, just say no. When they ask you to do something, just say no, right? So how can this be consistent with empathy? Which means like open yourself up to all possible experiences and points of view and try to occupy them. This is how you grow. And I think the answer to this one is, again, to make it your own. And that's what you helped me do, right? To realize that there is also an illusion of, hey, you cannot have both of them at the same time. Because often what the human mind will do, right, and the body, I guess, is to make it concrete. Oh, I cannot exercise from 5 to 6 p.m. every day, okay? Because then it means this 1 hour, if somebody needs a meeting with me or there's something important, your mind will say like, no, you have to be flexible. You have to be empathetic enough to be there for them, even though it's going to take away from what you may want to do for yourself, okay? And the way you forced me to see that there was another way that was even better than my original view of, hey, I have to always be available, was first, you tapped into infinity without even realizing, that, hey, I may miss this 1 hour, but this 1 hour will exist tomorrow or earlier or whatever. And if I am healthier and happier, I will be able to fit this and a lot more than I could have otherwise, when I have to sleep longer otherwise, or I'm like, I don't want to think because I'm kind of depressed and any of that stuff, okay? So, and the way you did it, as I said before, is you just made exercising so much fun, and you were doing this remotely, bless your heart, okay, for like almost 2 years, that I didn't want to miss the 5 to 6 p.m. thing. That was it, so it wasn't even in my mind that I had to convince myself every day from 5 to 6 I needed to exercise. You took care of that because you're just great at what you do, right? So I was just enjoying, I wanted to be there. And that is the gift we can give each other, right? The reasons to eat their broccoli and make it taste like freaking chocolate, okay, and your favorite kind. That's not easy, but people are getting good at this when they're good at something, okay? Just like I can try to teach you math and physics and quantum physics, and you can fall in love with all of it like you've never, done anything like it, okay? I'm getting pretty good at this, but when it comes to other stuff, you need experts. You need people that made it their own. They had empathy towards themselves and said, hey, I don't need to figure it out in the same way as this other genius before me, this other genius coach or this other genius math person or whatever. I'm going to embrace being dumb relative to them, okay, being stuck, because it means that I have a way potentially of unlocking once I do understand it. whatever they're trying to say, from my point of view, that's going to be something new that is added into the universe of possibilities, right? Because if somebody else had done it, I would have just gone directly to that other person, learn it from them in a way that is immediately connecting to my point of view, and wouldn't have to worry about it, right? Which we love also. There's some YouTube videos or other people, other books we read, they resonate with us. And this is great. But even greater than that often is when you feel stuck and then there is only a monopoly, right, of understanding something.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of making yourself feel terrible and be like useless, because I cannot learn calculus this way and all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, but how could I understand it? Being dumb as I am, I'm still a genius in my own way until I figure it out. Once I figure it out, it's going to be, and often when people do that, it means that they go way deeper than the original genius, right? Because they have to go to an even deeper aspect of the thing they were trying to understand that the other person with just brute forcing, with just pure strength of mind or something like that. You have to break it down to its simpler parts, right? Reduce it to things that others can then also understand. And that's how we do it, right? I mean, like for the past 100 years, there's a lot more people that understand Einstein's theory of general relativity and quantum physics. Tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 people in the world, right? That are pretty comfortable with it. And at the time when it came up, who know more than Einstein right now, by the way, and we're way younger even, okay? But at the time, it was just Einstein. And everyone's like, this is the smartest person on earth. How is it possible that we're so much smarter than the person, like, that didn't just figure out, but also understood it back then? It's that process of being dumb relative to the original person.
Yeah. It's like the evolution. As Sam would always say, the world is made up of people no smarter than you.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
Yeah. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Spiro, for joining us today. I just want to wrap up our time together and ask you some rapid fire hot take questions. I think there's a lot within this that already people can ponder on and like think for themselves how they want to apply it and really see a lot of change in themselves. But I'm curious, what's the one takeaway that you want listeners to hear from all of this and your story and your perspectives?
I think like if there's one takeaway is to believe that you're way more than you think that you are right now. Okay, that's a good first step because we are infinite in so many ways. I mean, it's pretty crazy. And once you have this realization, to just take it easy, take it slow. As they say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So,
I like that.
Yeah, take it slow, enjoy the process and make it your own. Same way that Naruto, one of my favorite characters in anime, all right, is this dumb kid that like nobody takes seriously, but he's the hero for a reason because it's from his point of view, he has that integrity, right? Personal integrity, how you feel about yourself, what you love about yourself, truly love it. It is very valuable, even though you may not see it reflected in other people's opinion, at least like in the short term, right?
Yes.
And yeah, be useful to others, connect with others. That's one of the most fun ways to make mistakes and still grow without losing sleep or money, is to do things for others, right? And as you do it, you're giving them things. I can't be like, why didn't you give me something for free or as a volunteer? But do it right the first time around. So that's a really great way, I think, to connect with others, be useful to them, and go for the pursuit of understanding, not truth.
Yes, pursuit of understanding. Alrighty. So then, hot take question. We'll just go rapid fire here. What does freedom look like to you?
What is freedom? I think, like I would say, honestly, it just goes down to visiting Japan as often as I can, going to Tokyo and having like fresh fish at Tsukiji Market or Toyosu now with Casey, and then taking a flight to Hokkaido to spend some time at Furano by the mountains with snow, and it's just such an amazing real experience. Just traveling honestly and having like meeting new people. So
yeah, I hope you guys get to do that more soon. What's a potentially controversial opinion that you have?
I would say that the highest form of intelligence is empathy. It's not mathematical, analytical ability, unfortunately for me. And the reason why I think that is because empathy in my mind requires insane imagination, both of the mind and of the heart, right? It needs to be able to take the punches to allow for this shift in point of view, to go places that you may not want to go or you may not care to go.
Love it. What's the best piece of advice you've ever come across?
Well, as far as that goes, I would have a general answer, which is all the advice that was actually useful and I took to heart and made it happen, right? Not even the advice that I thought was going to be useful. And then I was like, I don't know how to put it to practice, but the one that actually became part of my life after that.
Okay. Is there anyone in particular that like stands out to you?
Yeah, that healthy boundaries are important.
Yes.
And here's how to do it. This is what it looks like. So that was the second part was even more important.
Right. How to implement it.
Exactly. For you, right? What does it look like for you, for somebody with your synthetic, personality? Yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice you've ever come across?
I would say kind of the opposite of that, in the sense that all advice that does not have any lived experience attached to it. So basically, anyone who gives you advice because they read it somewhere or it sounds abstractly like the right thing to say, but they haven't tested it themselves, right? And so it could go either way.
Got it. Yes, I love that. And last question, what is your one wish for humanity?
My one wish for humanity. I would say the same thing, like pursue understanding, right? Not truth. That really concretely means that if you are having an argument with someone who has very polarizing views relative to yours, also very contradictory, try to understand where they are coming from. Try to understand why they believe these things versus how do I convince them to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And by doing that first step, you create a little bit of a bridge of trust between you that then can allow you to more easily, even just by your lived example as a human being, or just with a few words at the right time, for them to open that channel of communication and make a big difference in their life, and vice versa, because from their point of view, they also see you symmetrically as like you're the one that needs help. And so the best you can do sometimes is just to create an understanding of like why you make the choices that you do and why they make the choices that they do.
Yeah, I love that. I love the sentiment of kind of just opening up a conversation without judgment, without attachment to a certain, outcome. Because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I'll hear you out," because they want to change your opinion. But to just think deeply, understand with empathy, and just let that be it.
It's a tough thing to do, as you know, like when you actually have to go through it, you're like, I'm emotional right now. You're 100% human being, right? Yeah, you're like,
and that's where the boundaries come in. Know when to step away.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Spiro. I will drop the links down below in the description of how you guys can follow with Spiro and his journey, everything he's doing, all the amazing things. Thank you again so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure to catch up with you and hear everything you're doing and get your perspectives. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to sitting down with you and Sam and getting dinner again soon.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Bye. Have a great rest of your week.
Absolutely. Same to you. Bye.